So about 30 to 40% of Australian health budgets are spent on healthcare procurement. That is, buying our medical supplies that we use all day, every day. That will be gloves, and that can be scrubs and all sorts of medical equipment. And our members want to know that where we get that equipment from, we're not supporting countries that, for example, use child labour, that don't have decent employment standards, that employ a permanent workforce, that provide for people to live well, to feed their families, to be able to pay rent and live in homes. It's very concerning to us that the Australian government and healthcare providers would spend so much of our procurement money, that's our tax dollars, on companies in countries where, for example, they may use child labour.
What Catalyst has done is we have looked at all the policies and practices of those companies that they've made publicly available, and we've looked at whether those are adequate in relation to the labour and human rights risks that have been identified by other NGOs and civil society organisations that have researched this topic. And we've basically found that among these suppliers and manufacturers, there is a moderate awareness of labour exploitation and human rights abuses in Asia Pacific, whereas among the procuring companies, so the companies that mainly buy these products, their policies and practices are very much behind. So only 2 out of 10 companies actually have a publicly available sourcing or supply chain policy, which is shocking. So it is an offence for an Australian company or person to import any goods that are the result of forced labour, slavery or trafficking. But problematically, no company or person has ever been prosecuted for an offence like that. And given the fact that there are so many people in forced labour around the world, 12 million of which are in the Asia Pacific region, and because 7 countries in the Asia Pacific region are part of Australia's top 10 import partners, it's quite ridiculous that no one has ever been prosecuted for this. Now, obviously it's a law that is very hard to enforce, but that shouldn't be an excuse for continuing labour exploitation.
Australian companies are already being required to meet these supply chain transparency or disclosure requirements through foreign legislation, so the UK Modern Slavery Act. Australian companies should get guidance from the Australian government so that they can be on the front foot in responding to these challenges.
They can make a difference. They can require that the companies they purchase from, for example, don't use child labour, that the companies employ permanent workers, they pay minimum wages and decent standards for workers. The government has a massive responsibility, as we all do, to make sure our tax dollars are spent wisely and spent fairly.